Let's talk X-Men.
Yes, let's talk X-Men. Obviously, X-Men are they're great. We love them. They've been making X-Men movies for pretty much longer than basically any other Marvel characters.
It was some of the first comic book movies to really sort of get it right, or at least get things right in the right direction. I think one of the major issues with that, looking at them now, is that was the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Things have changed.
Since then, a lot of stuff's been rebooted. Spider-Man's coming up on his third big cinematic reboot.
Yep.
We've seen kind of Batman get rebooted a handful of times. X-Men are still sort of on the same timeline. They kind of did this whole switcheroo thing with Days of Future Past and time travel like they're prone to do. But now we are also getting kind of solo movies. We've got the third Wolverine movie coming out. We've got the second Deadpool, and we're getting an FX TV series of Legion. The problem is, at this point, there are so many different scattered X-Men timelines and universes and things going on that it's really, really hard to keep up with them and get everything right. And I think that they've reached a point where they're just sort of very loosely considering this a cinematic universe. And it sounds like they're pretty much just sort of saying screw it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good thing to do because I went to go see X-Men Apocalypse last year with some friends, and I think you have to go into that movie sort of with a lot of almost baggage, homework. If you bring in the sort of kind of uninitiated, we saw a thing that a lot of game publishers are doing now. You look at Star Wars as well, like dropping the numbering systems. Final Fantasy being like, it's for beginners and experts and stuff like that. The X-Men franchise is sort of like a big plate of spaghetti. Like it's kind of hard to track what universe happened, multiple different versions have happened, like with Wolverine entering. We've seen his origin story a few times now, so there's
Which
just
is
a lot.
honestly, that's kind of the same deal with the comics. The comics is never know where to start, where to get on board.
So Max, how do you fix that?
So obviously, if you're trying to keep track of the X-Men timelines and it's confusing, that's okay because the people who are making them aren't even trying anymore. We got Logan coming up. At one point was called Wolverine 3. At this point, the fact that they're calling it Logan should kind of tell you that they're just being like, this is sort of just its own movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine was such a disaster, and then The Wolverine might as well have been a reboot of that. And then Logan's coming along, and this is kind of a loose reinterpretation of Old Man Logan. But we got a quote from Hugh Jackman. There's been some back and forth about where this takes place. In the trailer, Wolverine picks up an X-Men comic and is like, the X-Men, and Xavier's there. But as far as this being, is this a sequel? Is he just sort of playing a spiritual successor to Wolverine? What's the deal?
Yeah.
Still Wolverine, obviously. But Hugh Jackman had this quote. He said, when you see the full movie, you'll understand. Not only is it different in terms of timeline and tone, it's a slightly different universe. It's actually a different paradigm, and that will become clear. Well, gee, I really hope so, because you didn't make it any clearer with that statement.
Yeah, so apparently it takes place in the late 2020s, which is decades after what's happening now. And I think that gives them enough space to sort of get away from even the possibility that there's like timeline convergence or crossover stuff. I think they just wanted a really cool excuse to make this film, and to go into this movie with the least amount of baggage as possible is the best approach. Because I don't want, I want to see characters like Rogue and Jubilee and Professor X and Storm, but I don't think I want to see them in this movie.
Okay, well that's fine. On the other hand, we've also got Deadpool 2 coming up, and we had a nice quote from Paul Wernick, who I believe is directing. He said, what's nice is Deadpool exists in his own universe. He's part of the larger X-Men universe, but in a way he isn't. Okay? He interacts with that world, but he is in the present. Now, obviously, the place and time is a weird thing here because we've got stuff set in the future, we've got stuff set in the past, you've got, Days of Future Past, and you've got First Class, and then Deadpool's making fun of the fact that there are too many timelines.
Right.
So you're like, okay, Deadpool gets a pass on that one. And then on top of that, we've also got Legion, the upcoming TV show, and we had Noah Hawley had a quote about that regarding the timelines and stuff. If you were to say, where is it and when is it, it's not exactly clear, I think. And a lot of that is because he's not exactly clear. It's the world as perceived subjectively on some level. So basically the excuses here are Wolverine's like, it's a paradigm, bub. You'll get it when you see the movie or whatever. And then Deadpool's like, it's Deadpool, who cares? And then Legion's like, he's crazy, so it makes sense in his head. And you're like, okay, so what the hell is the X-Men cinematic universe? Does it need to have one? Is it okay for these things to kind of just exist separately?
Yeah, and I think that's like, I remember being a kid picking up a comic book. One of the things that you really love about it is that you don't necessarily always know exactly where it sits in the timeline. Sometimes you're just like, it's a cool story, right? They're self-contained, independent, individual stories, and I think TV in the last 10 years or so has become excellent at sort of depicting that as a great medium, a great vessel, a great opportunity to tell a story that's sort of self-contained and has this sort of undercut or undercurrent thing. You look at a show like Fringe, right? A Monster of the Week show that would sort of bake in bigger, longer tail
sure.
throughout the entire base of it. There's something like that's really cool. It's something that you don't see from, I guess, like Twilight Zone or Black Mirror. But I think with this, you have this idea of coming into these characters, learning a little about them every week, and then understanding that maybe it does fit in the grand scheme of things, but it's not necessarily the most important aspect of the show.
I guess my issue here is that I love the source material, and I believe it's possible to take the X-Men and faithfully adapt it into stuff you see on the screen.
Sure.
I think that they've effectively given up on that, and I think what we're going to get is better movies and TV shows because of that, but not necessarily good X-Men movies and TV shows. Like, I would say that Logan looks like as much of a good Last of Us movie as it does a good Wolverine movie.
Of course, yeah.
And if you told me that Legion wasn't, if you didn't tell me that this was anything related to X-Men, I'd be like, this looks like a weird psychological thriller about a schizophrenic dude with mercy. It looks like the new M. Night Shyamalan movie,
right.
You know? But the fact that it's got the X-Men logo in the logo is kind of like, okay, so it's got expectations to live up to. So I don't know. You know, creative liberties are awesome, but
I think
what's the point of the X-Men license if you're not using it?
I totally agree with that, and I think that like they're sort of beholden to the Bryan Singer vision that he's had for now 15 years. But if you look at Spider-Man's something that gets rebooted every few years, right?
Yeah.
So why is it that gets a kind of a second and a third chance? Is it Fox? Is it the difference between Fox and Sony? Because now we're getting the third telling of Spider-Man in 15 years, right? Yeah. But X-Men is still part of this sort of main timeline. And I think that if you recasted all those characters, people might get a little upset. But let's get a few years away from this, from where we are now with the X-Men movies. Do the Logan thing. After that, sort of give it a fresh start.
Yep.
You know? Yep. Let's go 90s X-Men. Make the cartoon.
It needs a reboot. God, I want that.